This is Christian Gomez with the New American Magazine, and on the program today we have pro-life speaker and activist Heather Hobbs. She's a pro-life speaker and blogger for Save the One and the vice chair of Klamath County Right to Life in Oregon. Hi Heather, welcome to the program. We're glad to have you on today.
Hi Christian, thanks for having me.
So you were down in Georgia during the whole debacle with the legislation HB 481, the heartbeat bill as it's been called in the media. Can you tell us a little bit about that bill and why it's so important for the pro-life movement and for the unborn as a whole?
So HB 481, also known as Life Act in Georgia, it originally started out as a good, clean bill. It had no discriminatory exceptions, and essentially it is saying that once you can detect a heartbeat, you no longer can have an abortion. And so the reason why the heartbeat is very important in these pro-life laws that we're trying to get passed around the country is legality, and medically you need that heartbeat to verify life. And as far as a woman who maybe would have a miscarriage, if there's no heartbeat and she can't naturally pass the baby, medically that would still be considered an abortion. And so we have that heartbeat there to kind of draw that line to protect women who would otherwise die with a baby that had passed away. Because if you do a total ban without that heartbeat pill, that clause in there, the women could die. And so that's kind of one of those fine lines that a lot of pro-choice activists, they say, this ban will kill so many women or they're going to hurt themselves. We really use that heartbeat through all stages of life. If you or I were in the hospital and, heaven forbid, we're in a bad car accident, they would utilize our heartbeat to verify life, that we're still alive. And so the same concept applies. We're verifying the baby's alive. And at that point, when we verify the baby's alive, then you no longer can have an abortion.
So can you tell us a little bit about how this piece of legislation went through the legislature, what the process was, and how the bill has changed? You mentioned that it didn't have discriminatory facets to it originally. So what happened to the bill? How is it like now versus how it was before?
Well, as far as the process that it went through, it started out going to the House there. And at that point, I testified on behalf of it in its original form. And I just shared my story about my first child who was conceived in rape. And then the preceding two children that I had were also urged for abortion by doctors. And those discriminatory exceptions I mentioned earlier are targeting babies who have been conceived in rape, maybe a baby that has a disability. If a doctor says the baby's not likely to live, you have a whole large group of children who will be targeted and they're being dehumanized. And in this change that they've added, they're essentially still allowing abortion. So it's a big loophole, and it almost makes the bill pointless, but that was the change that was made literally minutes before I testified. It was slipped in really sneakily, and so I was kind of stunned there for a minute. I was just like, oh, we have exceptions now, and I can't in good conscience vouch for this bill. And so I just was very careful with my wording and said, in the original form, this bill was an excellent bill. It protected all babies. It didn't discriminate based upon disability or gender or race or anything like that. And now that it has these discriminatory changes in it, it can be used to target certain people groups.
Why do you think the bill was watered down? Was it to give it more traction in the legislature, or was it because of pressure coming from the left?
So it was actually pressure from the higher ups. It wasn't even so much the left. There were there were conservative Republicans that said they wouldn't sign it unless there was the rape exception and an exception for those with disabilities. My understanding is that Georgia's governor, Governor Kemp, he said he would sign it with or without exceptions. And so it was coming from kind of both sides. You had the liberal side, but you also had some conservatives who said that they wouldn't sign it or they wouldn't vote for it unless it had exceptions.
Wow. So it's kind of shocking to hear that some Republicans are responsible for watering down this bill and sort of torpedoing it before it even went through the whole legislative process. But now that it has passed, what has been the reaction of the left as they expect the governor to sign or not sign this? We've seen that the actress Alicia Milano has called for Hollywood to basically boycott the state of Georgia. What did you see personally down there from the left in terms of their reaction and their hostility towards this legislation?
You know, Christian, the vibe down there was very tense. As you know, I am in Oregon, and when I go up to Portland, that's like the liberal haven, you know, in the United States of America is that Seattle, Portland area. And so I'm very familiar with hostility towards people who are supporting life and advocating for children. And what I saw in Georgia actually stunned me because I grew up in the South. My grandma, most of my family's there in the Atlanta area. And I've always thought of Georgia, you know, as these wholesome, southern, conservative people. And while I was there were so many hostile liberals. I, at one point, had to have state police officers escorting me around the building because they were threatening my life. And there were people saying that they want my children to be raped so that way they're forced to have the child. It was just very vulgar and disgusting. And while I was there at the second phase of the bill, there were women behind me that were just sitting there whispering very obscene things and talking about how, you know, baby fetus deserves to be ripped apart and baby fetus just wants an incubator, just really graphic, disgusting things. And for me, the way that I work, I feel like we should all be able to debate healthily, civilly, and express our views in a way that is still respectful, regardless of if I don't agree with you. You can be respectful, and that is not what they're doing down there. They are bullying people. You know, there were. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Catherine Davis. She's a very amazing African American activist and pro-life activist, and she was being pushed and shoved. I was being pushed and shoved. You know, anybody who was a conservative or who was there to speak out for life, people were being very hostile. And so there was a heavy police presence there. You know, we had to have people escorting us around. And I was really shocked because I think of Georgia as a conservative state. And yet here all the liberals were just kind of flooding in the Capitol building. And we were definitely outnumbered. It was hard to even get in there to testify. They were trying to keep people out. They didn't want us there. And it was really eye-opening.
So regarding the Governor Kemp there in Georgia, have you heard whether he plans to sign this bill or not into law? He, like you said earlier, he said he would sign it with or without the exceptions, but this passed at the end of March, and still we haven't seen anything from the governor yet. So what do you think? What do you think is why is the governor stalling, basically?
So, you know, I had that same question. I anticipated him to sign it right away. As I'm sure you saw in the news, he was like, I'm unapologetically pro-life. I support this. And everyone kind of expected him to just sign it right away. And he still hasn't. And so I've heard many rumors and speculation, but as of now, they're saying he still intends to sign it and that he has until Mother's Day to do so. I do know that the liberals are waiting to start a lawsuit against them to kind of basically say that they're not allowing their human rights and that they're blocking women from having a choice. And, you know, they have a lawsuit waiting. So there's potential that maybe he's kind of waiting it out or waiting for some of the attention to die down. But nobody can really say for certain, but he has promised to sign the bill.
Where can people out there watching this learn more information about you and find more of your previous sort of interviews that you've done elsewhere?
You can go to my website, which is heatherhobbs.org. I also have a Facebook page, Heather Hobbs Pro-Life Speaker. I've recently started Twitter. I'm deep down an old lady, even though I'm in a young person's body. And so I'm very new to Twitter, and it is really funny. So if you want to go check out my tweets, it's Hobbs Pro-Life. And you'll get to watch me, you know, make all the mistakes that an older person would online.
Thank you for joining us today on the program, Heather, and we wish you all the best. God bless you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Christian, and I'd love to come hang out with y'all again anytime you need.
If you haven't already done so out there, be sure to subscribe to the New American YouTube channel and our Facebook page. We are also on Twitter as well. Take care and God bless.